So off we go.
Sure. So thanks, Dean MacKeith, for having me. So I'm Trinity Simons. I'm a 2004 Fay Jones B.Arch graduate. I left Fayetteville, went to get my master's city planning from MIT, but I always like to say that Arkansas is my home institution. Was honored to serve as the commencement speaker in 2015, recently served on the Capital Campaign Committee. Just last week, as we were just talking about, was on second year reviews. Love Arkansas, will always answer the call whenever Dean MacKeith or Mary or any of my friends there call. I'm honored to introduce this third in the series of alumni updates, this one on the Centers of Excellence at the Fay Jones School. I'm currently the executive director at the Mayor's Institute on City Design, where we educate mayors to be the chief urban designers of their city. You don't need me to tell you how well respected the school is outside of the confines of Arkansas, but it is, and I'm going to tell you a little anecdote. So just last week in 3 different meetings, various things about the school came up. One from a mayor, one from a design professional, and one from a university-based design center. And I think only one of those people knew my affiliation with the university. I share that to confirm what you already know, which is that the school is strong, the school is well respected, the school is a leader in the design fields. So we look forward to hearing today from the Centers of Excellence within the school, from Bob and Rebecca, from Garvan Woodland Gardens, my friend Marty Matlock with the Resiliency Center, and someone I credit with instilling within me my love of cities and a critical eye of analysis and rigor, former professor, mentor, now a friend and colleague, Steve Luoni with the University of Arkansas's Community Design Center. So with that, we'll turn it back over to Dean MacKeith.
Thanks very much, Trinity. And as well, we'll be hearing from Greg Herman, who is currently overseeing the continuing restoration of the Fay and Gus Jones house and stewarding it towards a longer future, as we'll soon hear. My words of thanks again, not only to you, Trinity, but to all of our alumni for tuning in today. Alumni who have contributed to the school in so many ways over so many years, really holding us as a school to the high standards that you've just outlined for us, and inspiring us to continue to take the school forward into its next 75 years. We have had 2 presentations previous to this, one in the first place outlining the work of our core departments and disciplines in architecture, landscape architecture, and interior design. We had a second presentation last week with regard to the school's programs in community education in the K through 12 areas of Arkansas in particular, and also the work that we are doing and have been doing with regard to diversity, equity, and inclusion. Today, yes, we will be focusing on what we're calling our centers of excellence, and I'll come to that in a diagrammatic form in just a minute or two. It is important to welcome everyone back to campus, so to speak, if that can be said under these remote circumstances. Here we are high above the campus, looking more or less south to the Boston Mountains, across the 2 towers of Old Main, with Vol Walker and the School of Architecture and Design just to our right center. But in welcoming you back to campus, I am mindful, as we now are very much in the school and the university, that we are welcoming you back to territory in which the university and the city and the state, in fact, were preceded by numerous Native American communities over many, many thousands of years. And it is now proper to begin all of our public events as a school with a land acknowledgement statement. The indigenous history of the land the University of Arkansas campus sits on goes back to time immemorial. And across that expanse of time, many successive groups have lived here and created sacred legacies in this area. The Fay Jones School of Architecture and Design acknowledges indigenous peoples were forced to leave their ancestral lands, including the Osage, Caddo, and Quapaw nations with ties to Northwest Arkansas. We further recognize that a portion of the Trail of Tears runs through our campus, and that the Cherokee, Choctaw, Muskogee or Creek, Chickasaw, and Seminole nations passed through what is now Arkansas during this forced removal. We acknowledge all Indigenous teachers, researchers, and all other residents in our community and region today. We seek continuity and connection to the past as we look to the future with increased collaboration with Indigenous governments and entities. We say to the citizens of Indigenous nations, we see you and we thank you. We welcome you again also to the specifics of the Fay Jones School of Architecture and Design, not only back to Vol Walker Hall, but also to the Stephen L. Anderson Design Center, which was, as most know, dedicated in 2013 and which has been the home to the school's programs predominantly for the last now 7 years. This has been, I would say, a period of both change and dynamism to the school. It has led us to asking some important, almost imperative questions with regard to what the school can be in the state and nationally. We have asked ourselves, what does it mean to be the Fay Jones School of Architecture and Design in 2020 and going forward? And what should be and must be the work of the school in 2020 and going forward? And I'll propose ahead of my colleagues' presentations that you'll begin to gain a sense of some of that outreach work through their presentations on the centers of excellence. We know that there is work to be done here and now and into the future, work to be done in public health, in economic recovery, in racial and social justice, and addressing climate change. We live, in a sense, within the laminate of these conditions. We propose as a school, if I'm to simplify, that we have a threefold mission. One is to educate our students to design for excellence, that is to say, to provide superior professional education and preparation. Two, to design for everyone, that is to say, to demonstrate as a school the importance of public service, the importance of advocacy into the public realm, and certainly the importance of being an inclusive school, bringing together voices and identities from all points of the state, of the nation, and of the world. And thirdly, we propose to design for environmental and economic resiliency, to address through design, state, national, and even global imperatives through the work of our faculty and ultimately the work of our students as they graduate and move out into the world. And again, I would propose that you'll hear some of this addressed in our presentation soon to come. We share as a school with the mission of the university, that is to say, we advance design excellence through a multidisciplinary, inclusive, place-responsive design education in service to Arkansas, the nation, and the world. And we feel this land-grant public university mission most keenly. Our vision aligns with that of the university, which is to say that the university aspires to build a better world. What could be more fitting for us as a school as we aspire to design a more humane, resilient future for the state of Arkansas, the nation, and the world? What does it mean to be a school named in honor of Fay Jones, the 1990 AIA gold medalist and one of truly the world's most leading architects? It at least means excellence in education, in the quality of the educators that we present to our students. This past several years has indicated dramatically the work that we do in this regard. We're now, of course, privileged by the presence of Professor Blackwell, the 2020 AIA gold medalist, also the 2020 SEC Professor of the Year, privileged by ACSA Distinguished Professor and Stephen L. Anderson Professor of Architecture and Urban Studies, Steve Luoni, who you'll hear from soon. 2020 AIAS Educator of the Year, John Folan, head of the Department of Architecture. SELA Landscape Architecture Educator of the Year, Carl Smith. Emily Baker, one of our returning alumni now to the faculty, an early career faculty award winner. I've received a recognition myself, and Professor Goodstein Murphy in her work in preservation design, also recognized for that work. This is a school of educational excellence. It is as well a school that is growing, and perhaps that might seem counterintuitive, but we believe that we are presenting ourselves to be of extraordinary value, not only to students here in Arkansas, but regionally and nationally. We are now standing at 730 students as we began this fall semester. That is up from 585 last spring. And this growth has occurred across our 3 departments, across our studies programs. It's now occurring within our new Master of Design Studies graduate curriculum. And we see it reflected in our first-year design studio most particularly. We are a school at the same time insistent on knowing our students well, knowing them by name and by identity, and recognizing them for the diversity that they bring to the school. We see here just a selection of more recent graduates, all of whom we could describe their stories and go on and on about. But this is truly the school that we aspire to, and it is one that we hope our alumni see as a valuable dimension as we continue to grow. We have grown, of course, as many know, through the growth of resources for the school. Mary Purvis and Ryan Peters have done amazing work over the last 6 to 7 years in this regard, where we have come to the near conclusion of our university and school capital campaign, having raised $68.5 million or thereabouts, with extraordinary support for capital programs, for capital projects, programs, students, faculty, and others, new chairs, new professorships in architecture, new projects underway right across the campus. And you see here some of these projects, and these, of course, also bear upon our centers of excellence, as again, you'll soon hear. The school is blessed with tremendous facilities. This AIA National Award-winning building, the Stephen L. Anderson Design Center, chief among them. But equally, the CDC premises in the Pryor Center on the downtown square. Also now the home of our Resiliency Center. Equally, Garvan Woodland Gardens, as you'll hear more about soon, 210 acres of woodland preserve in Hot Springs, centered around now, I might say, the Evans Treehouse, this wonderful construction designed by Modus Studio, our alumni-led practice here in Fayetteville. Also now, part of the school, the Fay and Gus Jones House. You'll hear of this shortly, and the work that we are beginning to do in preservation design. And lastly, what I will come to toward the end of our presentation, a focus on the Anthony Timberland Center for Design and Materials Innovation, an outgrowth and maybe embodiment of all the work we're doing to address timber and wood, the predominant natural resource of the state. If I was to diagram the school, and this is our jumping off point now for our presentations, if I was to diagram the school, I might propose this virtuous circle perhaps, showing the school about to celebrate its 75th year of programs in architecture and design, centered within its core disciplines of architecture, landscape architecture, interior design, building out into the state and out into the nation and out into the world through the outreach centers of excellence that you're about to hear about. The UA Community Design Center, the UA Resiliency Center, Garvan Woodland Gardens, and soon the Anthony Timberland Center. This will be our focus for the day, for the morning, these outreach centers, and we'll look forward to hearing from Greg Herman first in the Fay and Gus Jones House and Stewardship, then about Garvan Woodland Gardens, then the Resiliency Center, followed by the CDC, and lastly, the Anthony Timberland Center. And with that, I'll pass the proverbial, or let's say the metaphoric microphone to Greg Herman to tell us about the Fay and Gus Jones House. Greg, if you would.
Good morning. Everybody can hear me, I hope. My name is Greg Herman. I wish I could see all of your faces. I'm sure there are several of you that I know. I am an associate professor in the School of Architecture. I've been with the school since the early 90s, and it has been my pleasure to see the school grow and to change and to embrace a number of initiatives over time. One of those initiatives is the Legacy Initiative to embrace the heritage or the past of the school and to carry it into the future in a meaningful and educational way. My association with the Fay and Gus Jones House began in about 2010 when I had the opportunity to develop a historic American building survey dossier for the house, which then garnered national attention through the Peterson Prize Award program. In 2015, my relationship with the house became formalized when the Jones family donated the house and the property it sits on, and of course the property to the north of the Jones house to the school and to the university, with the purpose of maintaining Fay's legacy through the house and restoring the house for the use of future students, future faculty, and for the public as a research facility, as a place to consider preservation design initiatives, and also just as a place to admire as an excellent example of critical regionalist architecture. Next slide, please. In 2015, we prepared a 5-year plan for the restoration and interpretation of the Jones House. That effort is substantially complete now. What you're seeing here is a view into the living space off into the master bedroom space of the Jones House, nestled into the hillside in what was North Fayetteville, now is pretty much squarely in the center of the city. The house, as you see it in this image, may seem fairly ordinary. What is extraordinary is that all surfaces that you can see have been restored or replaced or repaired through the planning process that was devised in 2015, with a goal of getting the house into a condition where it would be tourable, where it would be useful to students as a preservation design exemplar, where it would be available potentially for future visiting faculty to take residence. What you see also is a smooth ceiling. I can't tell you how exciting it was to restore that component. All of the components you see, we took the house down more or less to the studs and rebuilt it to the condition that you see today. It was very exciting. That effort was supported by the Arkansas Natural and Cultural Resources Commission, along with the university and the school, in addition to private donors that made the restoration possible. What you see in the background is the piano that matches the baby grand that was originally in the house. This is our newest acquisition. This came from the estate of Ernie Jacks. The Jacks family was very generous in donating the piano to the Jones House so that we could bring it up to the place where we can use it again for small performances, which we have been able to do up until COVID came along. The house is in excellent condition now, and we're very proud to be able to carry it into the future. Next slide, please. This is a close-up of the living space and the piano that we recently acquired. If any of you are interested in visiting the house, even playing the piano, please contact the dean's office. We will continue to offer tours of the house and access to the house in a one-on-one basis. We're not inviting groups until COVID is wrapped up, but we have been welcoming people into the house. The house is very much I would call it a center of excellence for the school. into the future, in that it recognizes the Faye Jones legacy. It recognizes and accommodates current programming and future programming in preservation design initiatives. It recognizes the value of preservation of modern architecture. It certainly advances the legacy of Faye Jones and his multiplicity of his works, not just this house. And we're looking forward to being able to do that more. Included in advancing the Jones legacy has been, on my part, the award of 2 major grants, for which I'm serving as the primary investigator. First, a grant from the Chancellor's grant from the University of Arkansas to the tune of $80,000 to establish a digital representation of the house that would be immersive and engaging to a lay audience. This effort led to a second major grant, this time from the National Endowment for the Humanities, for $250,000 to enlarge the effort to bring the works of Faye Jones through digital means to the greater public. This coming spring, I will have the opportunity to conduct a studio, which will try to vision uses for the north site of the Faye Jones house, which is the image that you see right here. What you see here are the remains of a house that Faye designed, but never got further than the masonry work. You can see the Jones house in the background. So we will be visioning a project for this site that will relate to the Jones house and efforts for preservation of Jones works, his design advocacy, and the Jones design legacy. So we'll see how that goes. So the Jones House is very much a center for excellence for the school, for the university, for the community. And I hope through my efforts as a growing component in our national and even an international reputation.
Thanks very much, Greg. And with that, I'd like to point forward to an overview of Garvan Woodland Gardens with Bob Bledsoe and Becca Ohman. Bob and Becca, if you would.
Peter, if I could, I'd like to begin, and then I'm assuming everybody can hear me. I've had a little trouble connecting up, but I am Bob Bledsoe. I have been at the Gardens for almost 20 years, and 16 of those years as the director. And I want to express my appreciation and thanks not only to the Alumni Association, but also to Dean MacKeith for the privilege and opportunity to share with you a little bit about the Gardens and as one of the centers of excellence within the school. I'd like to begin with a very, very brief history of the Gardens. And if we could do slide 1. This property was purchased in 1920 by Arthur Cook, Miss Cook's father. And in 1934, he passed away, and Mrs. Garvan established the companies and corporations with their business interests, including this property. In 1934, the same year as Mr. Cook's death, the Carpenter Dam was built, creating not only Lake Hamilton, but also the 4.5 miles of shoreline we share on the lake as a part of this property. Ms. Garvan passed away in 93, and in 95, we entered into a trust agreement with the university. Trust agreement was originated in 93 before Ms. Garvan's death, and then the university took ownership of the property through trust in 1995. We opened to the public in 2002. This is our mission statement. I'm not going to bore you with reading it, but there are some things of interest that I would share with you. And I would begin with the third paragraph that says we're to develop and sustain the gardens, the landscape and structures of exceptional aesthetic, design, and construction. Very early on in our quest to accomplish this mission, we began to take the mission statement to heart. And next slide, with the construction of some very unique pieces of architecture. With the Bob and Sonny Evans Treehouse, we have received notoriety. If we have that slide, we received notoriety with the Anthony Chapel. The Anthony Chapel was designed by Maurice Jennings and received the AIA award as a merit award. Also, the chapel was awarded the #1 venue in our city for many years. BuzzFeed named it the second coolest place in America to be married. Next slide, please. The Bob and Sonny Evans Treehouse, which you see on the screen now, was designed by Modus Studios and has been quite the attraction, quite the conversation piece over the years. Modus Studio has been recognized for their design work in the State AIA Honor Award, the National AIA Small Project of the Year Cultural Award. Internationally, it's been awarded acclaim. Architectural newspaper called it the Best Design Cultural Award. Next slide, please. In addition to the many awards that we've received for our architecture, there's been many awards we've received for the beauty side of what we do at the gardens. Within our city, we're proclaimed the #1 attraction in the city. In the state, we have received acclaim as the AY Magazine Best Seasonal Feature of the Year. Nationally, we have received acclaim as TripAdvisor's rated the garden's #1 thing to do in Hot Springs. Southern Weddings rated Anthony Chapel the prettiest location in the South for a wedding. U.S. News and World Report called us the #1 place to visit in Arkansas. And MSN rated our light show as one of the best in America. Internationally, we've been called by Tsukiya Living Magazine the #5 rated Japanese garden in North America, and Expedia rated the garden's #6 most colorful place in the world. So as you can see, we've accomplished some goals with our beauty, and very strong and proud of the designations we've been given. But that's just half of what we do. The other half of what we're doing right now with the leadership of Dean MacKeith is establishing the education and research element of our mission statement. And with that, I'll turn it over to Becca Ohman to share with you some exciting projects, some future designs, and some things we're doing within this realm of the mission statement.
Thank you, Dr. Bledsoe. Dean MacKeith, if you would forward to the next slide, please. Hi, my name is Becca Ohman. I am the garden director of Garvan Gardens. I have been with the garden for 8 years and am a proud graduate of the Fay Jones School of Architecture and Design in landscape architecture. So it's my great pleasure to be part of my alma mater and also to participate in a dynamic resource of the school. The expectation of excellence that was described by Dr. Bledsoe and established by Mrs. Garvan in our first 20 years has not diminished. We hold fast to not only protecting Mrs. Garvan's legacy, but also establishing new goals and visions for the next 20 years. Garvan has completed nearly 65% of its 2008 Averill Master Plan. Most of our capital projects are fueled by private gifting and generous grants. 2020 saw the completion of new hardscape projects throughout the garden, and these images you'll see on the slide in front of you. These projects, which were funded by the Arkansas Natural and Cultural Resources Commissions, paved the primary circulation paths, which improved accessibility, created new garden spaces, and highlighted the garden's exceptional horticulture displays. Additionally, paving was completed for the Falling Leaves Plaza and Pavilion, which is a Jennings and Santa Rita designed project located at Mrs. Garvan's historic Old Brick Hill. The structure will be added to the plaza once funding is completed in the near future. Next slide, please. The upcoming year will see additional ANCRC grant monies being utilized to complete the hardscape and planting designs at Garvan Pavilion Terrace, outdoor lighting along key pathways, renovation of the Walker Floating Cloud Bridge, and installation of an irrigation filtration system that will curb the growth of Asiatic clams in the irrigation lines. While practical in nature, these are greatly anticipated projects for our field employees, as well as those charged with rental of our outstanding venues. Next slide, please. In recent years, with the leadership of Dean MacKeith, a stronger emphasis has been placed on utilizing the garden as a true center of the Fay Jones School. For many reasons, the garden's natural and cultural resources create an excellent learning laboratory for Fay Jones students. This semester, students from upper-level architecture studios participated in forest bathing, led by Arkansas State Parks' Lynn Warren. Forest bathing broadly means taking in all of one's senses, the forest atmosphere. Not simply a walk in the woods, it is the conscious practice of being immersed in the sights, sounds, and smells of the forest. The students' trip was culminated with planting Japanese maple trees on the hillside surrounding the Garden of the Pine Wind. This is an image in the far left corner of your screen. Additionally, students from the Interior Design Department's professional practice course participated in our Winterfest celebration. The students' work focused on creating light and art installations for the winter garden. By participating in the full design process, including development of design teams, shifting client needs, material selection, fabrication, and quality control, the students were provided a representational professional experience, with the added bonus of displaying their built work for Garvan's visitors. And that's in our next slide. You can see the work that the students did on display. This will be enjoyed by all of our visitors throughout the Winterfest celebration that goes through the end of our calendar year. And then the next slide, please. Finally, with the gift of the Ross and Mary Whipple Family Forest Education Center and the corresponding Jane Ross Forest Academy, the garden has been working closely with the efforts of multidisciplinary students from Fay Jones in the design and eventual construction of the center. As an extension of the Jane Ross Forest Academy, the garden will also host a summer fellowship in 2021. Students from all three departments in Fay, in collaboration with Masters of Education students, will develop the curriculum, program, and design of a nature-based preschool to be housed at Garvan. These students' work will be supported by the Bob and Carol Bledsoe Endowed Scholarship and also a grant from the University of Arkansas's Women's Giving Circle. So as you can see, great work is ongoing. We have wonderful partnerships and collaborations that we are forming, and we see great work on the very near horizon for Garvan and the students at Fay Jones. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Becca. Really wonderful overview, and thanks, Bob, as well, and to both of you for your leadership. We returned back from hot springs in the gardens to Fayetteville, to the downtown square, to the Pryor Center, and the premises of the University of Arkansas Resiliency Center, now very much a part of the Fay Jones School in collaboration with College of Engineering and Walton College of Business. This is an undertaking led by Professor Marty Matlock, Executive Director. Marty, if you would.
Thank you, Peter. Next slide, please. So the Resiliency Center, the University of Arkansas Resiliency Center, is the product of a conversation across campus over the last decade, faculty members from virtually every college, to try to understand how we address some of our biggest challenges. Next slide, please. So first of all, we start with the premise that everything is connected, our ecological, economic, and social domains. Next slide. And that everything is changing, and that rate of change is faster than anything we've ever experienced as a species. And finally, the next slide, that we're all in this together. So beginning with those premises, we ask, what impact can we at the University of Arkansas, with the tools we bring to the table for society, have? Next slide, please. What we recognize is that we need to be involved, and have and are in many ways involved in society's grand challenges, creating solutions that are not defined by our disciplines, but by the problems that we solve. We set goals that are reasonable and achievable, that have impacts that are measurable. We identify local problems that are connected to global grand challenges, So we identified 3 grand challenges to address based on the strengths and values of the institution. And we use this approach in our teaching, research, and outreach programs throughout the Resiliency Center across campus. Next slide, please. So what are those grand challenges? Well, as we're going to click through these a bit. Next, click again there, Peter. So you see we have a number of challenges that the World Economic Forum identified. This is pre-COVID, but ultimately, and go ahead at twice more. Yeah, there we go. And what we identified is food, water, and community are really the places where economic disparities, social polarization, our degrading environment are all in this space together. And the things that we can impact are in those 3 areas. And those are core strengths for the university. So we're an interdisciplinary research and graduate research, undergraduate and graduate studies program hosted by the Fay Jones School of Architecture and Design in partnership with the Walton College of Business and with the College of Engineering. But really we work across all colleges and campuses with those 3 areas of focus. Next slide, please. So if we look at what we're doing, we have the undergraduate program that Ken McCowan, the chair of the landscape architecture program, is leading, with undergraduate minor in sustainability, graduate certificate in sustainability. We're working on developing an executive online MS in sustainability. And then we work with the environmental dynamics program, another interdisciplinary graduate program with a master's and PhD in the graduate college for graduate degrees. Next slide, please. In our food system research, we've been working across the food supply chain fairly extensively for sustainability for the last 15 years. So we've created a number of sustainability indicators and metrics that are nationally and internationally applied across virtually all row crops, animal agriculture, specialty crop systems. I'm leading an initiative with the National Academies of Sciences, Engineering, and Math to define priority researches for creating a negative carbon agricultural system. We'll have this ready in April for the next administration and for USDA, and it will define research for the next 10 years in making agriculture a net negative, a place where we sequester more carbon than we emit, a solution to climate change. We're also working with the Council for Ag Science and Technology, CAST, with our American Society of Ag and Biological Engineers and ANSI to create a national standard for life cycle assessment. So we're leading the methodologies and the processes and the strategies across the food systems now in measuring and in solving the challenges of climate. Next slide, please. Of climate change. In our water resources, we've got a project with an interdisciplinary project with 5 universities across the nation to evaluate where we're going to grow our fruit and vegetables in the next 30 to 50 years based upon climate change. We're leading the water research initiative for that project. We're analyzing the impact of climate change on floods for our cities in Arkansas. And we're finding that 4 of our cities in Arkansas are subject to, have already seen in the last 100 years, significant increase in extreme rainfall events and therefore flooding. We'll work with engineering firms to identify wastewater treatment technologies to reduce and remove emerging contaminants and pathogens like COVID-19 from wastewater. And then finally, in partnership with chemical engineering and the Hawaii Department of Agriculture, we've developed a solar-powered disinfection process for irrigation water, a major vector for contamination of food. Next slide, please. These are just a synopsis of our projects, and this is how we'll wrap up. In our partnership with first of all, our community systems research really is deeply connected with the Community Design Center, which you'll hear about in about a minute. But we also we're working very closely with our Native American communities. I'm a member of the Cherokee Nation. We have 38 federally recognized tribes in Oklahoma, our neighbor to the west. So we have worked very closely with these tribes. So we have with the law school, we have a USDA funded Summer Institute for Native Americans in STEM fields. We've got an ongoing, now working on our 12th year summer research experience for undergraduates, focusing on Native Americans and ecosystem services. And we just received notice that we received an EPSCoR funding with the Hawaii Community College System, South Dakota State University, and UC Santa Clara and Arizona State University to implement a Native American Talking Circle program to better understand how to support students and communities in these critical underrepresented groups. And I'll turn it back to you, Dean MacKeith.
Thanks so much, Marty. Again, important work that you're doing university-wide and again, at state level and national level, but also important the way that you're working to integrate so much for us within the school as well. And as you say, much of what you do is in relationship to the Community Design Center. And to hear more about that, I'll ask Professor Steve Luoni, the Stephen L. Anderson Distinguished Professor in Architecture and Urban Studies and the Director of the UACDC. Steve.
Thanks, Peter. Yeah, good morning, everybody, and thanks for your interest in our center and our school. I'm the Stephen L. Anderson Chair in Architecture and Urban Studies. I've been here for 17 years. The center is 25 years old. And our mission is to promote creative development in Arkansas through combined design, education, and research solutions that enhance the physical environment. Next. In addition to solving for projects, we also solve for what we call place building platforms. So we're looking at code and policy work and agricultural urbanism, big box urbanism, context sensitive streets, watershed urbanism, affordable neighborhoods, transit oriented development. And I'll touch on a few of these through talking about projects. Next. The first platform I want to move into is housing. We've done extensive work at both the informal level, but also the affordable and with communal-based housing, along with urban workforce housing. This is in Fayetteville. We're taking 10 cities next, and we're designing transitional homeless villages next, which have both a community porch, A-frame cabins for individual homeless residents. This will be a village that will have not only shelter, but also wraparound social services, along with caseworkers on site to transition folks to employment opportunities and apartments. This is under construction right now by WER architects, who are architects of record. Next. As part of the homeless ecosystem, we've also done a homeless day center activity center for 7 Hills. While this project is on hold, it's become an important project nationally because it's one of the first day centers that has involved trauma-informed design in the planning of this center. It has both a phase 1 and phase 2. Phase 1 is for staff operations. Phase 2 is for operation housing daily activities for the homeless population. Next, you can see extensive porch space. This is a building that's really designed, it's more than a building, it's a complex design to admit people as much as they want to be admitted into a place of refuge during the day. Next. Hitting inside using courtyards that are also a refuge for homeless population. So really working with individuals and figuring out what the niche needs are in the everyday life of our homeless populations. This is also part of an effort to move people forward into employment opportunities and residential opportunities. Next. Continuing with housing, just showing some of our other work. This was a competition we entered for a mining community in Canada. This is important for us, looking at new forms of communal housing that also have economic development, in this case, agricultural urbanism with it. Next. This is our project that we did 2 years ago for Pine Bluff. This is a housing first project for downtown. It's a triage master plan that looks at reviving America's second fastest shrinking city. It's also a city whose demographic is 80% African American. It was once one of our wealthiest cities, not just in Arkansas, but also nationwide. It's now one of our poorest and most unsafest. So we did a housing first scheme with students. Next. Looking at designing 28 units of missing middle housing. Next, which could be recombined into urban neighborhoods along with public space that is located next to Pine Bluff's identified centers of strength. And here's what one of those neighborhoods could look like. Next. Continuing this effort, missing middle housing for Conway, Arkansas. This is an old metal scrapyard industrial area 2 blocks from downtown. that we're working with the city on revitalizing for mixed income community. The city has no tradition of urban housing downtown, and working with students, this was an advocacy effort to show the city what downtown housing could be. Next. Also, it's important working with students on not just housing, but the connection of housing and making the city, and particularly next on rendering. Really looking at the details in housing, but also connecting that back to the details of the city is an important activity over the last 6 years that we've really focused on. Housing is a big effort on our part. Next. This is a project we did with Marlon Blackwell. This is important for the center's efforts in looking at lower carbon urbanism. This is in Bentonville, Arkansas. It's a 15-minute neighborhood. There's this effort to actually put all uses, all important essential uses, into a mixed use, aggregated, denser component in sprawling metropolitan areas. And working with developers, we are at the edge of the Walmart campus, trying to look at what a mixed use project should look like that's structured around walking, biking, and of course accommodates cars. Next. The space is as big as the square of Bentonville, so looking at how we can reincorporate density into the outskirts of Bentonville, using the downtown as a model. Next. The understanding that we still have to design for the car, so the parking is put on put into a podium in the ground, and then we fold an interior square. It becomes a folded plaza, much like Siena, that organizes the internal structure of this mixed use. This has co-working, co-housing, a hotel that you see on the right. Next. And here's what that space looks like inside. So this is really using traditional urbanism to solve for contemporary issues and how we put land uses together. Next. And there's looking at the hotel, becomes a place for art, for native landscapes. We still are organizing around a strip shopping center. So again, we're mixing contemporary notions of suburban development with traditional notions of urbanism. Next. Even though Marty didn't show it, we've worked for 4 years in Hawaii with the Secretary of Agriculture on urban food issues. Well, I don't have time to show you that. I did want to show you the UA Center for Farm and Food Entrepreneurship, working with the Division of Ag and the Walton Family Foundation on creating a certificate program for farmers, where we actually put a community-based complex in the fields with greenhouses. Next. And so an education center also becomes a community center where food is showcased, innovations in food and value-added processing, not just in food growing, not just in the fields, but looking at the vertical integration of foods and then celebrating that with the community. Next. And then lastly, ending with wood. The school has a major initiative in wood that's working with other corporations and universities nationally and internationally. And we've been asked to look at wood, but we look at it not so much from a technological perspective. There's a lot of amazing research going on out there, but like everything at the center, we begin with the city. So right now, our students are looking at the 19 building types, which you can walk into a bank now and get a loan for. It's mostly the stuff that we build in sprawling areas, gas stations, warehouses, storage buildings, fast food restaurants, roadside motels, garden apartments, single family houses, grocery stores. And so this is all the stuff that's in a real estate investment trust, which are mostly logistic expressions of spaces. And what the staff and students are looking at now is how to take mass timber engineering and rethink a type to actually value add to these types so that they become ready for the densification of a sprawling area, but they also deliver additional services. So for instance, next, a grocery store can become a third place. Next. The kind of dreaded garden apartment, which has the stairway between it. This is a 12-unit complex. We look at stacking glue-lam trusses that become screen porches, play areas, an extension of the interior. So we're not re-questioning or upsetting these logistics expressions of space. We're actually expanding their business models already. Next. And of course, lastly, the roadside hotel, a Holiday Inn or a Super 8, really taking the business office, the fitness center, and the breakfast bar and stacking that as you enter the hotel, starts to articulate each of the floors and becomes almost like a ship in terms of integrating the uses within what is otherwise a fairly complex building. And so those are some of the projects we're working on now. There's many others to show, so I'd invite you to go to our website where all of our work and all of our reports and books are on the website. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Steve. I think, again, 10 minutes is barely enough to encompass even a year or 2 years of work. There's so much to appreciate in the work that you've done, that Marty's done and doing, that's happening at the gardens, and also now in preservation design through the Fay and Gus Jones House. I want to end with a prospect that Steve alluded to, which is built out of our work addressing the timber and wood resources of the state of Arkansas. I think you see that all of our centers of excellence, to one extent or another, are addressing critical state needs and also educating students for potential work, not only in the state, but elsewhere across the nation and arguably across the world. This is certainly the proposition that we have made with regard to the work that we envision in timber and wood. And it begins, as I think all of our efforts begin in education, with posing of a question. In this case, what does it mean to be a land-grant public university and a school of architecture and design in a state that is 60% forest? It means, for instance, that we can position ourselves as something of a design catalyst in wood design, and take your pick: community design, resiliency design, preservation design, but we can position ourselves as something of a design catalyst in this regard, in seeing Arkansas as a forest state, a sustainable state, a forest economy. It means that over the last 5 years, we've been able to undertake work in studios and seminars, in public education, exhibitions and installations, faculty research, design and construction on campus, and then lastly, in a coming building project. In our studios and seminars, as you've just heard, the CDC has been working in a wood city scenario. In other areas of the faculty, we've worked in mass timber housing, in design build efforts, in 3D printing of wood dust and other ways of innovating within the material. We have taken this into seminar courses as well as into one of our concentrations in the Master of Design graduate program. You'll hear more about that if you attend our upcoming Alumni Association presentation on Thursday. We've done a great deal in terms of public education, that is to say, educating people from across the state, but in particular people in the architecture, engineering, and contracting industries with regard to the potentials of thinking and working in timber and wood in a variety of symposia, conferences, and seminars over the last 5 years. In particular, just this past Saturday, we hosted 22 schools of architecture and their representatives, really summarizing the current state of academic teaching and research in timber and wood design education. We've had exhibitions now in the school, including, not even before I arrived, an exhibition on the, I think, the innovative furniture of wooden furniture of Edward Durrell Stone's design, exhibitions from other programs, University of Texas, Aalto University, and we have a faculty who are working at full-scale construction exhibition design. I note here salvage swings, which is the product of faculty members Jessica Colangelo, Charles Sharpless, a competition-winning design that was constructed at the northern tip of Roosevelt Island 2 summers ago. And we've begun a series of publications of smaller or larger scale that have been coming out of our conferences and symposia and seminars. Our faculty research has begun to intensify, running from the artistic end of the spectrum. Laura Terry undertaking a wonderful set of forest portraits from the pine forests of southern Arkansas, to more technical understandings that Professor Tahar Masadi is undertaking in moisture measurement of CLT construction, life cycle analysis of CLT construction, making use of the Adohi residence halls on campus. And in that sense, design and construction on campus has become a major focus for the university, not only through the Adohi Hall residence halls, which are 200,000 square feet and 700 beds, and at that scale, currently the largest mass timber project in the United States. That entire effort was really begun by the design and construction of the university's library annex building in South Fayetteville, one of the first demonstrations in the state of glulam frame and cross-laminated timber panelized envelope construction. And everything that the university has done in this regard has essentially been proof of concept for this way of approaching design and construction for Walmart and the undertaking that they now have underway of 3 million structured square feet for their home offices in Bentonville, which will be predominantly out of mass timber, currently in design with Gensler. That has motivated the movement of, or the initiation of a production facility for cross-laminated timber in Conway, very close to Professor Luoni's site that he identified in the work that they're doing there. But this is a major economic gain for the state of Arkansas, building jobs and making the best use of Arkansas's sustainably managed resources. More particularly now, here in the school, as you've already heard from Becca Ohman, we're moving forward with what will be the Ross and Mary Whipple Family Forest Education Center on the premises of Garvan Woodland Gardens. And that, yes, will house the Jane Ross Forest Academy, which is intended to be, in essence, a set of public programs educating Arkansas citizens and those who visit the gardens from around the country to the virtues and values of Arkansas's forest and timber and wood products. This is coming forward as a project in a design build sequence of seminars and studios led by Professor and Head of the Department of Architecture, John Folan. All of that activity has really needed a home beyond the premises of the school and beyond what we could provide. And this has led us through to the identification first of committed project funds and then to the onset of design and construction for what will be the Anthony Center for Design and Materials Innovation. The lead gift in this project was provided by John Ed and Isabel Anthony. Mr. Anthony is the CEO of Anthony Timberlands and truly believing in the value of architecture and design in advancing the timber and wood products industries of the state. We undertook an international competition at the beginning of this year, leading to 6 finalists in competition for the commission. And from that process, we're able to select this year's Pritzker Prize award-winning architects, Grafton Architects of Dublin, Ireland, as the selected architects for this commission. They'll be working with Modus Studio here in Fayetteville as Arkansas Architects of Record. And this project has just begun its initial design meetings, ultimately leading to construction, which will be led by Nabholz contractors out of Conway. Some of these images are drawn from the competition entry. There is a good deal of dynamism in this project as we assess program, assess the availability of Arkansas-sourced materials, and come to understand the potentials of construction. But it is an exciting prospect for us. With design beginning now, we anticipate groundbreaking next fall And if all goes well, then the dedication of the new 50,000 square foot facility in South Fayetteville, adjacent to the library annex building. We anticipate the dedication of that new facility in the fall of 2023. This again returns me back to the role that the school can play in the state economy, in the state environment, not only in its forest, not only through this work in wood design and innovation, but in fact, through the outreach efforts of our centers of excellence, as you've just heard this afternoon or this morning, and also then through our even outward circle of focus areas, which we'll talk more about on this coming Thursday. And with that, I'll return back to our original question, our questions. What does it mean to be the school in 2020 and going forward? And what should be and must be our work in 2020 and going forward? Hopefully, we've begun to suggest to you some very direct answers to this as we continue our focus on design for excellence, design for everyone, design for environmental and economic resiliency. And again, we have some time now for questions, about 10 minutes or so before we formally need to sign off, but also invite you to our December 10th discussion on design futures. With that, I'll turn it over to Trinity for questions that might have come up or commentary. Trinity, thank you.
Thanks, Peter. Thanks to all of our presenters as well. I encourage everyone who's still with us to be thinking of some questions. If you want to throw those in the chat, I just am always impressed at the work of the school and the outreach centers here, and you know, in particular the kind of scales of impact that we've had here. You know, from thinking of the scale of impact to the workers at Garvan, to scaling back through our history to you know, addressing local challenges with truly global applications. You know, the impact that the school is having never ceases to amaze me. So with that, let's take some questions from our gathered audience. What do we have? Is the Zoom quiet?
Charles McKinney never lacks for at least for commentary or observation. So
I'm in awe, really. It just doesn't stop. I'm so happy to come onto these programs just to see what everyone at the school is accomplishing. It is really extraordinary. I see the work of lots of schools, and you're right there. You're really tremendous. And the blah, 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 it just goes on. I don't know what's next.
well, I know that I see the Van Sickles are listening in, and I wonder, Mr. Van Sickle, I know you have a very particular interest in the work that our CDC is doing, and I'd like to invite your observations in that regard or others. You're muted. You're muted. Jim, you're muted. There we go.
Thank you, Peter. You're doing wonderful work over there. Every time I sit in on one of these, I'm further impressed by where the school has gone from when I was there back in the 60s. It's amazing. I do have just one question, and that is, do you have an internship program going, or do you have one planned, particularly for minority students?
Yeah, that's a great question, and what is emerging now very, very quickly, in fact, are a whole series of funded opportunities for students and faculty in the cause of diversity and inclusion. This is partially, if we could turn to, for instance, the fellowship programs that, or internship program that Becca outlined at the Gardens. It is very much written into a whole series of scholarships, which have now been provided to the school in order to reach out to students, particularly in the Delta counties of the state of Arkansas. It's also now being part of the funding opportunities that are being provided to faculty to serve as mentors to students, either before they arrive into the school formally, and certainly as they arrive into the school as students. So this is very quickly merging onto our agenda as something that we can fund and structure for students.
Thank you, Peter.
Peter, this is Scott.
Yes.
These last forums, over the past week, have been remarkable, and they provoke some thinking about how they might be tied together, even looking to the forum later in the week. And that is that the design profession is dealing with unprecedented demands, not like we've seen before. And I think largely the design profession is failing us. But I do see the University of Arkansas and what you're doing there as the ray of hope. And I think one of the things that we need to consider as we talk about design excellence is that the traditional measures of design excellence are obsolete, in the same way old practices in the design professions are obsolete. And there need to be new measures for what we call contemporary design excellence. I think one of the things that you've brought up over this week has to tie back to the discussions about diversity, inclusion, and equity. And I think those are the backbone for propelling a change to adapt new and contemporary measures for design excellence and what we consider the definition of beauty, and for consequential climate action, and for social and environmental justice. And because those aspects of diversity and equity bring to the table a much wider worldview discussion, as you've already done in the last week, for the issues that we face. And so I think that the school is not only a leader in education, but you're certainly setting the course for the profession in what you're conveying to students and what the faculty is practicing. And I think you need to be commended for that. And I ask you to consider what are the real true measures of contemporary design excellence as you move forward.
Yeah, I appreciate that very much, Scott. And if people don't know Scott Smith, he's coming in here from Sea Ranch, I imagine. So we have another standard of design excellence. But Trinity, you've been in the school with these programs and are now out in the world. And I know you've got to perhaps jump off in a couple minutes, but I'll ask everyone to stay on. We can certainly talk a little bit more, but Trinity, in regards to this redefining design excellence to changed and contemporary conditions, how are you finding this yourself in the work that you're doing?
Well, I think it's a really provocative question, but it's one that we've been dealing with in our work for longer than COVID. But I think this set of presentations starts to lay out a pathway to some of those answers as well, because it has a lot to do with design as service. And applying the skills that you have as a designer to problem solving. I know that sounds it sounds trite, but that's where you know, I think where we've seen design rise to the occasion the last 9 months has not been where capital D design has tried to showcase, but it's where design has approached a problem humbly and come to a table where they already had a set of skills, a set of networks of connections, and I don't know, I'm not articulating this quite right.
Well, I wonder, Trinity,
Yeah.
I could turn to either Marty or
Sorry.
Steve. There's ways now of, I know that in which you are both conceiving and proposing design to students on the one hand, but also to external partners on the other hand. And it's not really in the cause of aesthetics. Let's put it in that way. Steve?
Yeah. I'll follow up with an example. And you know, the word aesthetics is really interesting because there's an intelligence in that. And we solve these problems through aesthetic thinking, but that's not the only thinking. Let's take the homeless transition village, for instance. That took 2.5 years to convince the city of Fayetteville to overcome their own codes that would prevent that work. And by the way, most of the work that I showed you today is illegal in all those communities we're proposing it for. And you remember Trinity on the Creative Corridor. That project too was illegal by Little Rock's books, and it took the mayor as a champion to push that work. So sometimes the schools, you know, with the infrastructure like a design center is the only way to solve or a key way to solve for these problems. WER could never afford 2.5 years of working with the city to get them to agree to be a partner and overcome their codes to solve for this homeless issue. So working in collaboration as an ecosystem with nonprofit partners in Fayetteville, with private firms, with the city, and a couple of other entities, mostly in fundraising, we're able to get this $800,000 village under construction. And even though it's going to cost $2-3 million over the 5-year life cycle, it's going to save the city and other entities $30 million. But again, it couldn't have been done simply through private practice. And this is where architecture as a discipline really needs other entities to bridge between academia and practice. MIC is a perfect example of that, where we need that kind of infrastructure.
Yeah, thanks. I see it. There's a really wonderful comment that Anne has made, and Anne, we can all read it, but maybe you'd like to expand on it more vocally.
I mean, for me, what brings this all together, and I love the way Stephen did highlight the fact that without partnerships and without, you know, government policy and citizens, you know, community, any other partners, without this holistic approach, we can't really lead. And I think that design excellence is about strategic design, and strategic design always through a purpose that aligns all stakeholders, usually, if you get the purpose right. And I think that we, you know, have tended not to solve for this greater, more overarching purpose. I mean, in some cases, yes, but we can never do that enough. And I think, you know, just people are looking for more meaningful solutions. And if we can get sort of a broader group of stakeholders with us, we can impact greater, you know, in greater ways. And I think, you know, the millennials coming up are are all over that. So if we're looking to the future, it's definitely, innovation through a purpose, mindfulness. And
Peter, if I could add to that just briefly,
Sure.
the value of this multicultural approach, I know we're out of time, but this value of this multicultural approach is why we have to increase our diversity. And I'll give you one anecdote. The founders of our great democracy relied upon used the Iroquois and Confederacy as a model to build our democracy, to frame the tricameral House, to work with representative governance. The Iroquois and Confederacy was an egalitarian culture where women also served as leaders as well as men. And our founding fathers called that the Petticoat Council, and they said, that's ridiculous. We won't do that. They were blinded by their cultural and historic bigotries and biases. And it's taken us 250 years as a country to overcome those bigotries and biases. That one simple example, 250 years, we're finally getting around to reconciling that bigotry. How many more blind bigotries and biases do we have in our culture that we're not even aware of, that we just scoff at because of our lack of inclusiveness and because of our lack of diversity in decision-making? And that's one of the things that I see so remarkable about this space, this place, this organization, the Fay Jones School, in its role in real decision-making.
I think, Marty, I think that and what Ann and Steve have said is exactly right. And what we need to do is have these discussions, these measures in mind that become part of our lexicon, not only for our design processes and our discussion, but for our critical analysis. This is never part of the critical analysis that we read in the press, for instance. That's what we read in the architectural and design press is mostly standards that are outdated and don't reflect the true challenges that we have as design professionals for achieving design excellence in the 21st century.